Hey guys, what's up? Today I'm going to show you this neat 4-barrel derringer cap gun toy I made. It's got a working double action trigger, so every time you pull the trigger, it cocks the hammer, rotates this little cylinder 90 degrees with the firing pin on it, and it fires your caps. It's got these little 3D printed shells in here, and for ammo it just uses regular plastic strip caps. You can also use the ring caps and just cut them apart if you want to use those. And I'll show you how it works, do a little tear down, and I hope you enjoy it. So for the little barrel latching mechanism, it's real simple. It's just got this little slider right here, and it's spring loaded. So when you pull it forward, you can swing the barrel forward. And then as you can see, this little red part in here is the latch. It's just got a little lip that engages with this lip on the barrel. Real simple, it just locks the barrel in place. And then for the firing mechanism, you can see here when I pull the trigger back, the back of the trigger engages on the sear right here, which is this little lever, and that pushes the whole hammer arm backwards, which compresses this spring, the main firing spring. And then this part here, the hand, engages on the back of the hammer, this little ratchet part, and that pushes the ratchet upward, which rotates the cylinder with the firing pin 90 degrees. So that's how you fire all 4 of your shells in quick succession. Alright, let's take it apart and have a look at what's inside. So this design is loosely based on the COP 357, which is a real firearm. For the most part, the mechanism is really similar. This one is just designed for 3D printing. The standard design is made out of metal and a lot more robust. So I had to modify and make everything from scratch. The barrel latch is completely different. The COP has the barrel latch up here. I moved it down here. So now that we've gotten all the screws loosened up, the two halves of the frame just come apart. As you can see here, you have the hand with a rubber band that comes down and hooks onto the frame. So when you pull it back, hand pops back into place, and it's just pivoting around a screw. On the other half, you can see the trigger spring, and the whole hammer assembly. Now that I've taken it apart, you can see this is the hammer assembly, and this most important part of the build. You got to make sure this works properly, or none of the toy will work properly. So what I like to start with is this little orange spring cup where the main spring is. Pop the spring out and show you. You want this inner cup to fit inside the outer cup really easily, really smoothly, no resistance. I had to sand this outer edge and this inner edge just a little bit to get them to fit without resistance, and I've used some white lithium grease to lubricate them so they're quieter, they don't make quite as much noise. And then I also sanded this inner hole so that the spring fits in there all the way and slides in and out really easily. You don't want it to stick like halfway in there. Okay, and as you can see, there's just a couple little rubber bands on here. One for the sear. The sear needs to be able to pivot real smoothly and make sure it springs back into place. And for that, there's just a rubber band wrapped around the back of the sear and here, and then both ends of the rubber band are pinned down by a screw and a washer. And you got to make sure that the rubber band isn't interfering with the hammerhead and doesn't prevent it from spinning around. Then on this side, you can see there's this little pivot arm, the black part, and as you rotate the head, you can see it pivots out and then back in. That's part of the ratcheting mechanism, and it's just got a rubber band wrapped around it, and then it's pinned under this screw and washer on this side. And I'll take off the hammerhead to show you what the ratchet looks like. So hammerhead just attaches to the hammer arm just with a screw through here and connects onto the ratchet on the back. Okay. So here's what the inside looks like after you take the little ratchet part off the back. You can see the hammer has this little star kind of pattern on it, and it slides through just a simple hole in the hammer arm. And again, I've lubricated this with a ton of white lithium grease. It makes it move a lot smoother and more reliably. And then you can see that the ratchet arm here, when you turn the hammerhead, wants to lock into those 4 places, which are 90 degrees apart from each other. So real simple, the ratchet arm here is just a washer, the arm, and then another washer, and then a screw, just so nothing binds up. And you want to make sure you don't over tighten any of these screws because you want stuff to move freely. You don't want them pinned real tight. And when you're building this, you want to make sure that the hammerhead spins really smoothly. You don't want it to get stuck at any points other than the 90-degree points. So if you just flick it, you want to make sure it stops every 90 degrees. And if you over tighten that, it'll stop in weird places. So then you just back the screw off, and it should work really well. I think I might have it a little loose, so I'm going to tighten it up. And the ratchet part on the back shouldn't spin freely from the hammerhead. You want to make sure it's tight enough that they're locked together, but not tight enough to make it bind up. Now that you've got the hammer assembly all together, put it aside, and then you'll want to remove all the supports from the frame pieces. There might be supports in this trigger spring hole, and there will be supports under here on this surface where the barrel latch goes. And then might be supports in all of the nut pockets where the M2 nuts fit into. So I start by installing the nuts into the nut pockets on the frame. I just stick an M2 nut on an M2 screw, and then I stick it down into the pocket. Might be a tight fit, but that's a good thing. Then you just want to get it flat in there, and then you take the screw and you just unscrew it, and you'll have a nice little embedded nut in your part. And you do that for 1 on the right side of the frame, and then 4 on the left side of the frame. And there's also a nut that fits down into this barrel latch part. And if you need to get a nut out, you just thread a screw in there and then just kind of wiggle it and pull until your nut pops out. So once you've got your hammer assembled and you've removed all your supports from the frame, and you've got your hand installed on the left side of the frame with the rubber band, and you make sure your hand moves freely, you want to start by taking your right side grip, lining it up onto the right side of the frame, and then take an M20 and stick it through this hole right here. You always want to start with this screw. Then we take our hammer assembly and we put the screw through the bottom pivot point and just kind of stick it on the end here. And then we want to take our bottom spring cap, kind of push it and just angle it down so it's compressing the spring against the frame here. Then we're going to take our other M2x20 screw and put it through that hole. So at this point we've got this screw all the way through, and the hammer is flush against the frame down here, and then the spring cup is flush against the frame also, but this screw is not all the way through. You just want it flush with the top here. And now we install the trigger spring. Like that, and then the trigger just has a hole and the spring fits into it. If your spring doesn't fit into it easily, you might have to drill that out or sand it so it fits properly. So you can see that, and we want to make sure the trigger spring is straight, so when you pull it back it doesn't bunch up. It should just go feed into here when it's compressed. Now we want to line up this screw with this hole on the other side of the frame. And as you can see, the frames aren't pushed together all the way yet. We want to just get this screw started. So after that's started, you can see the spring cup kind of gets stuck on the frame here, so I'm just going to push the spring cup down with the Allen wrench and squeeze the two halves together. They should pop together pretty easily. Then we're going to continue by tightening these two screws down. And don't over tighten these screws, just make them tight enough that everything stays together, but not tight enough to stop the hammer arm from swinging back and forth. Alright, next I'm going to install the barrel latch. You want to make sure you've embedded the nut into this piece. And then we'll take the little barrel latch spring and we'll drop it in here. Then we line up this piece on this side. Then I'm going to turn it around. And then I'm just going to use the Allen wrench. Just going to use the Allen wrench to compress the spring while pushing the latch through the other side. So then the latch moves back and forth when you compress the spring. Then we put the little other latch side on there. And then at this point, just ensure that the latch swings back and forth freely. If it gets stuck, just loosen that screw up just a little bit. Alright, then we're just going to tighten down this screw, add a screw here and a screw up here. So once you have this screw for the hand tightened, you want to make sure the hand doesn't get stuck back like this. Just want to loosen that screw until it pops forward, and then just make sure it springs back into place when you pull it back. And then last part is to put a barrel on it. I have different choices for barrels. I have short ones, long ones, ones with holes in them, ones with slots in them, ones without holes or slots, and I have these little orange cylinders you can print and glue onto the end of the barrel. Or you can just do like a filament swap or print it entirely out of some bright color. Whatever you want to do. I think I'm going to put this barrel on for now. Yeah, they're all interchangeable. They all just have the same connection point and same latch. And as you can see, I have a couple different versions of the toy. There's the skeleton frame like this where you can see all the mechanism. It's a lot easier to troubleshoot and stuff. Or I have the like more completed frame that you can't see through, and this one is like 4 parts. This frame is just 4 parts that screw together. But they're pretty similar. They've used mostly the same hardware. This one uses a couple longer screws and 1 extra nut, but other than that, they're pretty much exactly the same thing. So one thing about this design is that, I don't know if you can see, but the frame is very thin on both sides, right here, and that makes it kind of flexible up here. Shouldn't really be a problem, even if those break. They're not there for any structural reason or anything. They're just to make it look nicer, but I have updated that in the design, so they're thicker and the hammerhead's a little bit different. So, just to let you guys know. So, on the original design, I was having lots of issues with the hammer over-rotating. So instead of rotating 90 degrees, it'd rotate like 135 degrees or 180 degrees with every trigger pull, which was bad. So I've added these little fins, and when they rotate, they contact this piece of the frame up here, and that stops it from over-rotating. So that's what those fins are. Okay. So to load it, you just take the shells and you stick them in the back here. And then you close it, and when you have ammo in here, the firing pin might get in the way, so I like to pull the trigger back just a little bit so the firing pin's out of the way, so you can move the barrel back and forth really easily. And then you put caps on here and then, fire it. I have a couple different kind of ammo shells to show you. These ones are totally 3D printed, and you can see it's just a plastic little cylinder and the caps fit over those, and these work great. Some plastics work better than others. The orange PLA I used seems to work really, really well. I've shot like 100 caps through each of these, and they're really beat up, and I've also dry fired on them a ton for testing. And the orange ones have held up really, really well. These still work. The gold ones, I've been able to get anywhere from like 10 to like 50 caps through them, and then sometimes the cylinder part on the inside breaks out, which is not fun. So I definitely stick with a non-silk filament for these shells. And then I also made these shells that are printed, and then I've just inserted a little section of brass tube in there. I just cut a little 10mm section of 3.5mm diameter brass tube, and I just cut it with a handsaw, and then stuck the tube in there and glued it in so it won't come out. And I've shot like 100 caps through each of these, and they've held up really, really well. So I recommend doing that if you can find the brass tube. If you can't find the brass tube, plastic ones really work well. I've also made this little speed loader. You just load the shells onto here. And then line it up with your barrel. and then you pull to the side, and then you've loaded all 4 of your shells, and that's a lot faster than sticking the shells in there one by one. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that. I have lots of projects coming up in the future, so I'd appreciate if you subscribed to my channel and shared this video with someone you think would enjoy it. Alright, thanks. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.